welcome back. Well, we'll see more than 97% drop in the total turnover for the week ended October the 10th. And that's a summary of what happened on the AFEX commodity exchange. Joining us now with the details is Omotola Kongwe, market data and research analyst with AFEX. Hi, Omotola. Good morning. So give us the details of the market.
Hi, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. So across the last trading week, we saw a mixed performance across our key indicators. We saw a decline of 97.96% in our total turnover, moving from 0.49 billion naira to close at 0.01 billion naira. We also saw a decline of 91.35% in the total volume of contracts traded, declining from about 702,000 contracts to close at about 61,000 contracts. We, however, saw an increase in number of deals, increasing by 45.59% to close at 360 deals, moving from 261 deals. Our AFEX commodity index, however, closed flat to close the trading week at 455.71 basis points. We saw an increase of 1.87% in the AFEX export index, increasing from 189.65 points to close at 190 points. Across total volumes traded, we generally saw a decline across most of the commodities. However, we saw an increase in the volume of paddy rice traded and the volume of cashew traded. Across our prices, generally, prices closed flat on the exchange in the last trading week. For more information about our commodities, kindly visit our website at africaexchange.com, and to join our trading platform, you can download the COMEX app on Play Store or the iOS Store.
All right, Omotola Kongwe, thank you so much for giving us the details of trading on the exchange for the week ended October the 10th. But that's not all that has happened for the week in AFEX. We've been talking about flooding and the threats to food security. AFEX is now also interested in that, and for them, in most cases, the crops are unrecoverable. We talked with Olam Agri yesterday, and we saw the devastation at that cost to their crops, between $15 and $20 million. And this begs the question of how much impact flood has had, and will continue to have if nothing is done about it. Well, let's find out what AFEX thinks and what AFEX is doing about it. We have David Ibidapo, Associate Strategy and Corporate Finance with AFEX. Hi, David. Good morning. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Hi, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good to have you. So, well, I don't know, but let me just ask, what's the impact of this disaster, flood that we've seen? From your perspective, we've seen the news, we've spoken to some smallholder farmers, we've spoken to the big one, Olam Agri, but tell us from AFEX perspective, how bad is the situation?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think it's a very worrisome situation because the flooding case that we are seeing this time is one of the biggest flooding events that we've seen in a decade, and it's actually very devastating, especially for the fact that this is a period where we should be expecting harvest for a lot of commodities, right? Especially for rice. If you look at some major producing states of paddy rice in the country, they're actually all flooded. And I think you and I, even the common man on the streets, can actually is already feeling some of the impact. So we are looking at queues at filling stations as a result of flooding. Even I just as a side by, right, I ordering something from an online store, and one of the messages they're sending is, okay, sorry, this will be delayed because of the flooding situation, right? So it's very devastating, and it's actually a very big issue for food security in Nigeria currently, right? So we are seeing about 164,000 hectares actually laid to waste, and about 40 billion naira from an estimate standpoint point of view, right, wasted in investment, right? And so for paddy rice, in fact, before the flooding, our estimation for paddy rice production this year was about 12% decline year on year, and that's because we were seeing that a lot of farmers weren't going to be planting or cultivating paddy rice during the wet season, and a lot of them are more focused on the dry season plantation and harvest, right? But as a result of when we accounted for the flood situation, so we are looking at a 21% potential decline in the output for paddy rice this year, and that's really is something to be worried about because it's a major staple in the country.
Yeah, well, obviously something to be worried about because the forecast, you now have to reduce it now. Let's look at the way forward. For instance, innovation. You know, is there a way out of this? And what's AFEX doing about that?
Yeah, so I think it's very important for us to start looking at innovative solutions and not just focused on one aspect of the agricultural value chain, but more focused across all aspects of the agricultural value chain. Because the truth of the matter is, when we are talking about food security, while we are talking about increasing sporting production levels, right? We're also talking about storage. We're also talking about logistics. We're also talking about access to markets, which is more like it is an inclusive package, right? So while we are focused on food production, even as a private organization, right? One of the things I would also want to say is that there must be a synchronization, right, between the government and also private institutions, also to like drive food security. And we're talking about innovative solutions around sporting production levels, right? Also storages, which is very low. If you look at the numbers, we can actually store about 5 to 7% of annual production in a year, right? And access to markets in terms of logistics, in terms of road networks and the likes, right? And also access to finance, most especially for the major stakeholders like the farmers and the processors. So I think we should start looking at the whole value chain entirely as to looking at just sporting production levels and probably trying to ameliorate the effect on prices.
Yeah, you talked about the need for collaboration between the private and the public sector. What, from your perspective, should the government be doing now in the area of infrastructure, in the area of policies? Because every year we talk about flood, every year we count our losses following the flood. What should be done, or what could be done to at least to reduce it, at least to an extent, to a manageable extent?
Yeah, so it boils down to, in my view, it boils down to increasing or heavily investing in infrastructures, right? Because if you look at one of the causes of the flooding this year, it's actually an overflowing, or the Cameroon dam, Lagdo dam, right, which the authorities of Cameroon actually opened to kind of shed off excess water, right? And this is meeting with excess rainfall in Nigeria. So a lot of states that are currently along the River Niger, River Benue coast, right, are actually largely affected, right? And if you go back to history, one of the conversations around that Cameroon dam was the fact that Nigeria, so there was an agreement between Cameroon and Nigeria that, okay, Nigeria would have to build a dam, Dancing Hausa dam in Adamawa state, which should be twice larger than the dam that the Cameroonians were going to build. And the whole essence will be to be able to absorb that excess water that is going to be released, and also be able to generate about 300 megawatts of electricity, and also be able to serve as irrigation to about 150,000 hectares of farmers, right? So that was the whole, but we have not actually completed that dam, and that's one of the effects that we're actually reeling from now. So it speaks to heavy investment in infrastructure, closing that infrastructure gap. So we need to be intentional about this. And also because of our forecast for this year across commodities, especially for major staples like maize and paddy rice, which we are anticipating that maize is going to be falling by about 14% and paddy rice about 21%. We think there should be some immediate efforts from policymakers to kind of ameliorate from the production aspect and also from the price effect aspect, right? Because we think we should start thinking of building reserves across other grain commodities and not just focused on one commodity, and also strategically releasing these volumes into the market when it seems as if the supply is actually low in the market. Because at the end of the day, the effect is largely felt by the households. They feel the brunt more, and we are talking about higher inflationary pressure for the next season.
So do we say these suggestions, at least the one you're talking about, infrastructure and all that, can we accept our fate for this year and say we should start working towards next year, or can we still salvage something this year?
Yeah, so I think in terms of effect, yes, we will feel the effect, right? Because at least between the next 2 to 3 months, right, we will feel the effect, right? So one of the things we should start looking at is more about, okay, how do we kind of ameliorate the price pressure that we'll be building as a result of the losses that we are counting currently, right? And also, we have a dry season harvest planting season that should kick off between late January into late December into January, right? So I think a lot of focus should be around how do we motivate a lot of farmers to go into planting dry season paddy rice and getting more volumes from that, right? So we should be talking around things around input subsidy, right? And also how do we get irrigation, and how do we provide those infrastructure that farmers can leverage on to produce, right? Because if you look at between the next 2 to 3 months, which is typically we fall on our festive periods, right? There's always high demand for rice and other commodities, and we don't see any immediate fix to some of the challenges that we're currently facing, right? So it's a double issue for Nigeria. First of all, the key highlight for this year was the fact that the Russia-Ukraine crisis actually kind of spiked up fertilizer price levels, which caused a lot of farmers to reduce their fertilizer consumption. This is something we've seen across the years. Whenever fertilizer prices soars or increases like that, there's always a decline in fertilizer consumption in Nigeria, right? And that's one of our major focus points, right, for production levels. And now we are talking about the floods. So we should be looking more into the medium to long term and see how we can ameliorate this issue. Because across commodities, we're already seeing food balances decline, and in some cases, the food deficit widening. So I think it's a major thing, and we need to start taking it serious. The political will has to be there, and also private organizations needs to also continue to intensify their efforts in promoting Nigeria's food security.
Yeah, thank you so much. We do hope the political will from the private and the public sector would meet at some point. Thank you so much, David Ibidakpo, Associate Strategy and Corporate Finance with AFEX. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Let's take a breather. We're back for the markets.